welcome back. This is video 2 on our kind of student finance mini series. So if you haven't watched video 1 and you're thinking, who's this guy, please watch that because the rest will make sense. So this is video 2, the cost of higher education. It's often worth kind of just pointing out that some people use university and higher education interchangeably, and in most cases they are accurate to do that. However, what's worth remembering is a university is a type of higher education provider. You don't necessarily need to go to a university in order to gain a higher education level qualification. So we're not talking here about funding for university specifically. We are talking about funding for higher education, which could be obtained in a college, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. So without further ado, the cost of higher education, whether you're going to university or a traditional FE college. So the cost of higher education, generally speaking, can be divided into 2 main streams. You have tuition fees on one side, living costs on the other. And now we're going to start with tuition fees, but I guarantee that most of you, if you have some knowledge of student finance, you probably know more about tuition fees than you do about living costs. However, there's usually a bit of an imbalance because actually it's going to be the living costs that maybe will cause you, I'll say issues, that might not be the right word, at university more than tuition fees. Like tuition fees gets all the political attention, but actually as a student you should probably be more focused on the living costs and how you're going to fund your day-to-day activities. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So tuition fees, most of you, like I said, will have an idea of this. If not, doesn't matter. Universities can now charge up to £9,250 per academic year for their undergraduate courses. Slightly more for accelerated courses, but I imagine most of you are thinking about the 9,250. There's this thing called the TEF, the Teaching Excellence Framework, which allows universities to increase their tuition fees in line with inflation, hence why it has gone up in previous years and may at some point go up in the future. That's yet to be seen. Now, 9,250 is a lot of money. I'm not going to insult anyone's intelligence by suggesting that it's not, but what I will do is ask you just to put that to one side for a second, because when we talk about repayments in video 4, I think it is, there is a big difference between the amount you are charged and the amount you pay back. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but let's just come back to that. Let's just come back to that. So eligible students will not have to pay their tuition fees up front. Liam, have you paid any tuition fees to Kingston University yet?
Absolutely zero.
Absolutely zero. Students do not pay upfront, providing that you're eligible, and refer back to video 1 about eligibility, that sort of thing. Both eligible full and part-time students can have their fees covered by what's called a tuition fee loan. That's what you apply for. It's non-means tested, which means that it doesn't take into consideration things like your assessed household income, where in the UK you decide to study, and whether you move out of your parental home. That's not the case with another loan that we'll talk about in a second, but for this, if you're eligible, you will have your fees covered. And I've kind of probably given the game away here, but Liam, you didn't pay your university. Did you see any of this money?
No,
Did you?
I've not seen anything. All I get to see is on a piece of paper that they say they're going to pay you lot guys the money, and I'm just like, okay.
Okay. Do not think that one day you're going to log on to your online banking and you'll see £9,250 in your bank account. Liam, I'm sure you would have thought, wicked, how much tech stuff can I buy with this? But to avoid that situation entirely, the government effectively pay your university directly. That money doesn't come via you. There might be a few people who are thinking about the Foundation Diploma in Art and Design. If this is you, please prick your ears up at this point. The problem with this is that some people, the full title is the Foundation Diploma in Art and Design. However, some people call it a Foundation Year in Art and Design or Foundation Degree in Art and Design. Those are different things. Those are different things. Because it's a Foundation Diploma, it's regarded as a level 3 qualification. It's the equivalent of basically what you're doing in terms of level of qualification that you're doing now at college. And because it's level 3, you're not eligible for funding via Student Finance England. That's what SFE stands for, Student Finance England. However, there is some good news. Students under the age of 19, the 31st of August, the year of entry, will not be charged tuition fees. Now, that just means that, okay, you'll just have to think about your living costs. For instance, my sister studied graphic design at Kingston, but she did have foundation diploma in Bournemouth, which was much closer to home. So she stayed at home for the foundation and then moved to university when she was eligible for the full funding. Tuition fees, what does it pay for? Usually face to face, I'd get a conversation going about like, what do you think it pays for? Liam, I'm going to pick on you because you're my audience today.
That's fine.
What do you think your tuition fees to the university, what does it pay for? What do you think?
I mean, I think for the most part, it's paying for the lecturer's time. You're going to be paying for the use of facilities. You're going to be paying for the equipment that you may be using on your course. So if you're doing labs, obviously you need to be, labs need to be paid for. They're expensive pieces of equipment. For mine, I mean, the massive games lab, that's going to cost money as well. So it's all paying for the upkeep of these sort of facilities and the payments for that sort of thing. That's what I would say it pays for mostly.
Hand on my heart, Liam has not seen these slides before, but that's perfect. So tuition fees cover key elements of your course and academic life, as well as core services related to students' wellbeing and experience on campus. This can include, but not limited to, all of these things on the screen. Feel free to pause the video if you want just to check them out. But as Liam has said, kind of course admin costs, lecture, seminars, facilities and equipment, students' union membership, all that sort of thing, including your graduation ceremony right at the end of your time at university. So Liam, I'm going to ask you the flip of this question. What tuition fees, what it doesn't pay for, what do you have to pay for that's not covered by your tuition fees?
So the tuition fees wouldn't be covering any necessary like course books. So depending on the course you're doing, you might need to be getting some course books for reading or extra reading. The fees won't pay for any of that. If there's any non-essential trips, so say if you're doing say geography and there's an optional trip they're going to be doing, that also isn't paid for. You pay for that yourself. And then obviously tuition fees, seeing as you don't see the money anything towards your living costs on that, and that's going to be obviously in another part of another video, so we'll leave that one for that too.
Fantastic, absolutely. So tuition fees don't usually cover all of these things on the screen, and again, just simply for time, feel free to pause the video, check out this list. Yes, textbooks, other course materials, as Liam said, some courses require more purchase of those things than others. Art and design being kind of a key, an easy example in that one. But and yes, to reiterate as well what Liam said, living costs as well. Your tuition fees wouldn't usually cover things like accommodation, travel to campus, that sort of thing. So we're back here. We've talked about tuition fees. Let's just flip over and talk about living costs a little bit. So I want to introduce this to you, what's called a maintenance loan. So tuition fee loan, maintenance loan. So all eligible full and part-time students can have a loan to help cover their living costs. And the reason why I've underlined or highlighted help cover is because most students, Liam, correct me if I'm wrong, find that the money coming in from their maintenance loan doesn't actually cover everything they need to pay for. Is that the case with you, Liam?
I'd say particularly at the beginning of each year, that is definitely true. When it comes to the next two terms, I tend to find it's a bit easier. It's just that always when you're moving back into that Kingston or wherever you're going to be moving, that moving cost and the settling in costs, they add up and they come out of nowhere. And also maybe at the beginning of the year, you need to be paying for some extra things that you may not necessarily be accounting for. So maybe a laptop, or like I was this year, I bought a whole new PC and I built it. That obviously that incurs a huge cost, and my maintenance loan did help pay for it. But it then has a knock-on effect later on down the line. So that's why having a part-time job is always a great idea to help you out with these sort of things.
Fantastic. Yes. So Save the Student did a really good article. The details in the bottom right hand side of the screen. They actually calculated that the average student is about £223 a month short. I'm not saying that to strike fear into anyone watching this. I'm saying it just so you are aware of the reality. But moving on. So this is paid at the start of every term directly into your bank account. So you do see this money. The amount that you receive depends on what's referred to as your household or family income, which means that it is means tested. And the argument there is that it means that those who require more financial support will be in receipt of it. But there are other factors, including where in the UK you decide to study and whether you move out of your parental home, and we'll look at some examples in a second. As a result, it is normal for everyone to receive a different amount because you've got different variables going on. But you do need to tell Student Finance England if there is a change to your circumstances. And importantly as well, you won't actually receive the first allocation of your maintenance loan until you've registered with your university, and that's through the involvement process. And the reason why I say that, quite rightly, as Liam said, typically at the beginning of each year, there are some initial costs that you have to pay for. Maybe it's a deposit on the accommodation, maybe it's a new textbook or laptop or whatever. People quite rightly think, oh, I'll use the first allocation of my maintenance loan to pay for X, Y, and Z. However, you won't get that until maybe a couple of weeks into term, potentially. So let's look at some examples. These are the figures for a student looking to go to university in September 2021. So if you are living at your parental home, we have a minimum and a maximum with this one, and I'll explain that, reiterate why that is in a second. So if you're living within your parental home, you've got those two figures there, but you'll be eligible for between £3,515 and £7,987 per academic year. And again, the reason why there's an upper and a lower amount there is because the amount you actually receive is dependent on the assessed household income, which I will come back to, I promise. If you move away from your or you hold what's called independent student status, and for the full details, please feel free to pause the video and just read that text at the bottom of the screen. It then splits into two. If you are outside Greater London, you've got those two figures there, a minimum amount and a maximum amount per academic year. And then if you're studying inside Greater London, as you'd imagine, higher living costs, the slightly higher allocation here you've got between those two figures there. I encourage you to pause the video and maybe just absorb those figures in your own time, but those are the amounts there. Okay, so that's the end of video 2. I look forward to joining you in video 3.